Hey y'all, and welcome back to a new video. Today we're going to be looking at a chess game that I played yesterday where I managed to get into one of the most insane and sharp middle games that I've ever played in a 10-minute game, and it was also incredibly tricky and tactical. Either way, we're going to get into it. My opponent starts off the game with e4. I think here about which move I want to play. I obviously can play the Carl or Sicilian, those two opponents I really know, and I decided this time I would play the Sicilian. My opponent goes with the move knight f3, and I trying to remember my theory, where I believe that the move is knight c6, d4, cd4, knight takes d4, and here what I had been playing in the past was the immediate move g6, but recently I've realized that's wrong because my opponent can immediately get what is it called? Moroxy bind position here, so I didn't want to get into that, so I remember the correct move, which is the move knight f6 first, targeting the pawn and forcing the move knight to c3. Defending the pawn, and then after that move, I thought, okay, well, if I remember my theory correctly, the move is, I think, d6 here, stopping this move after knight takes c6, and then I played g6, and I played the line that I know, and life is gonna be good. So I played the move d6, which I think is still correct. I'm pretty sure g6 wasn't as good, in my opinion. I didn't really enjoy this due to knight takes c6, d takes c6, and this move e5, and I was unsure of what was going on here. I wasn't sure that I liked the position, so I didn't go for that. Instead, I go for d6. My opponent goes with the move bishop to g5. And here I'm like, okay, well, I obviously can't play the move g6 now, because, well, if I play g6, what's going to happen is he's going to take, I'm going to take back with the pawn, and then I have this weakness for the rest of the game, and I'm probably just going to lose the pawn in the long run, and we don't want to do that. So I'm like, well, then g6 is off the table, so maybe I either messed up my opening, or we're just in a different position that I haven't studied yet, so let's think about this properly. And I'm like, okay, I don't really know what to play. I think I'm on my own here. I'm just going to play something normal and go for a little bit of an imbalanced position. And I play this very interesting move, h6. And this is already given an accuracy just because, well, it's a very interesting move. It invites white to double black's pawns like this. I can't take with the e pawn, of course, because then this pawn is weak in all variations, so I can't do that. So, of course, I had taken with the g pawn planned. And then what ends up happening is that black has the open g file, black is going to keep the king in the center, and it's just a very tricky position where both sides have a lot to think about. What I could have done here was I could have played the move e6, but I didn't really like this move. I just didn't really believe in locking my bishop away behind this pawn. I was like, why am I doing that? Didn't really make much sense to me. I'm sure it was fine. I'm sure it's fine. The computer gives it like plus 0.3 or whatever, but it's just not with my style, so I didn't want to go for this. So instead, they move h6. My opponent takes on f6, of course, and I take back with the g pawn. And now what ends up happening is that we get into an imbalanced game. My opponent immediately goes wrong because they don't know what to really do. The best move here, well, there's two moves that really work. The best move is bishop to b5, hitting my knight. I have to play bishop d7, and at the end of the day, white is able to get some good play with the move knight f5, right? And well, if I take, I'd be losing my bishop pair, which is not what I want to do. And the bishop pair is a lot of why black has chances here. And if I go a6, we just simply go takes, bishop takes c6, and white's knights are actually dominating in this position after the move queen to h5, where you can see now these pieces are stuck defending this pawn, and there's some problems on the king side. My opponent didn't find that, and instead went with the move f4, which makes sense, trying to get into a more of a Grand Prix attack system. And if you don't know, the Grand Prix attack is in the Sicilian, white plays f4 on move 2, I believe. I think so, yeah, f4 on move 2. No, maybe it's this, and then f4. I don't really remember, but it's something to do with that. So take that with a grain of salt because I don't really know those lines very well. But either way, f4, and we resemble some sort of Grand Prix attack where white has already gone out for these pawns. But I immediately thought this wasn't that good because I didn't see the plan with f4. okay, is my opponent going to go here and lose just a full pawn? Probably not. Like, my opponent's better than that. They're not going to be doing that. What is my opponent going to do then? Are they going to play this move, but then this pawn is a backwards pawn, and then he give me this square, which seems good. And it also felt like it loosened some light squares over here if my opponent wasn't going to do that. So I was just like, well, that move doesn't really make much sense. And I decided that, okay, well, what to do. My opponent has some weaknesses over in the center with our king not being castled. This knight is in the center, looks pretty loose. I think that the move queen b6 is probably correct, because if the knight moves, then like if the knight moves back here, well, I simply have this check, and I thought, okay, black is probably doing better here. Actually, at this position, I have the simple move f5, which is very, very nice. And after e takes f5, I am able to develop my bishop, and this is actually better than what I had planned, but I thought that at least I would have that check and I would be better. Instead, after queen b6, my opponent goes for a very interesting tactic, which just doesn't work. My opponent goes for this very, very crazy move, knight to d5. And this is already insane. Knight d5 is genuinely crazy, but I mean, it makes sense why he played it. He spent 40 seconds on this move, and he played knight d5. And the idea is that after queen takes d4, knight takes d4, queen takes d4, queen takes d4, then knight takes d4. Well, you can't give this check, right? Because, well, after the end of the day, I'm also giving a check and picking up your rook. So my opponent's idea was that after takes, they would go long castles, hit my knight, and after my knight comes back here, to defend this square, so then there's no fork, they would hit my knight again, my knight would go somewhere, probably this square, then they're going to get this fork, and they thought that, okay, at the end of the day, they're locking on my light squared bishop, they might have some play here, even though the knight is a little bit out of the game, there's probably some good play here. But the problem is that just doesn't work at all. And I thought of a very, very interesting way to play here. And after I go into this line, queen takes d4, knight takes d4, long castles, I realize that black has a brilliant move here that gives black a very, very strong advantage. Of course, I can play the move knight c6, get forked, go with this line, and at the end of the day, probably the knight is trapped. But I just thought, well, this is a little bit silly, right? Like, okay, I'm getting the knight back, right? But now what ends up happening is my opponent has hope. They have this strong center here. They have decent play on the files, and it feels like my pieces are a little bit caught up, and my opponent does, in fact, have a rook for 2 pieces, which is normally worse for the side with the rook, but it felt like they had hope, and I don't like hope. I don't like giving my opponents hope. I think that's stupid. I think if there's a chess game that I'm playing, I'm going to be the only one who's having fun. There will be no fun being had by my opponent. It's at least my motto. So in this variation, I found this crazy idea where after the move knight to e6, sorry, and his idea with f5, instead of moving the knight out of the way, which is a completely fine move, knight c5 is good because, of course, after takes, you have this knight takes e4, and probably black is winning. I still didn't like this. I had a better move, which was the move king to d8, where I simply stopped the fork. And I'm arguing that, okay, after you take my knight, which has to be played, because otherwise they're just losing, what's going to end up happening is I'm going to have this massive center after f takes e6, hitting the knight away, and this pawn is going to be weak, and I'm up a pawn. So I trade off a full knight, a full piece, like no questions asked. I was up a piece for a pawn, but black is completely winning just because of that, which is so cool. And I really like when I'm able to do stuff like that. And yeah, so I'm already better. My opponent has to go knight f4. I'm thinking here for a little bit. I end up playing this also very, very nice idea, this move h5, which is the best move again, saying that, okay, I'm threatening this and to win your knight, right? With the pin, you can't defend it. If you go here, I have this move. Let's just put this on the board. Here, right? The knight is lost. There's no other way to defend it. And my other idea is after the move h5, first of all, also it's on a light square, so that means that my dark squared bishop is being able to be opened. And after this move, I was thinking about bishop to h6 check, but also I just wasn't I wouldn't be sad about this either, because these pawns are actually hindering my bishop's development, and I think that the knight was a little bit better, and now that we're in same colored bishops, probably my opponent has less chance of a draw. So I thought that was pretty reasonable. My opponent here plays the move king to b1, which makes sense, simply making sure that bishop h6 doesn't work anymore. Bishop h6 here now would just lose a pawn, and I'm still better for black, because black has the bishop pair and has a ton of play. But I mean, why would we do this, right? Sorry about that. And instead, I find a very, very nice move. I realize here that my opponent really doesn't have any play, like at all. My opponent has nothing here, and I find this crazy move that, in all honesty, looks pretty simple now that I'm looking back at it, but in the game it felt like a very, very counterintuitive, because it's just not a move that you're really going to look at, which is this move e5, which is also the best move. And I'm simply hitting the knight, but the point why this is like kind of a tough move to play is that after the move knight to d5, you immediately see what the problem is. Now I'm giving white a better square. Now my opponent has a good square on d5 that they didn't have originally, and that like causes hesitation. Like you don't always want to go for this, but the reason why I went for this line is because I realized that I have another trick here, which is also crazy. So many tricks are crazy here. I have the move e6, which is insane. And it should be a brilliant move because the pawn is hanging and I'm giving up a pawn. But if my opponent takes it, the knight is trapped. And for some reason, I calculated the complicated version. King e7 traps the knight in one move, but I didn't see that during the game. I saw this line, rook h6, knight g8, and then this traps the knight, which is true. But I mean, I could have just found king e7 in 2 seconds. Either way, my opponent doesn't do that because they're 2200 and they know what they're doing. So instead he plays the move knight to c3. And I think here for a little bit, but I just play a very normal move. I play the move a6, and my streak of playing the best move every time is over. That was a very long streak, actually. I think from move 9 to move 16, I played the best move, which is pretty cool. But on move 17, I play a6, which is just okay. It's just pretty good. And yeah, that streak is over, but I mean, I'm still completely winning. And my opponent, in all honesty here, probably, well, no, probably shouldn't resign because there's still play for white. But their simple ideas for black are that I'm eventually going to play this move, get the pawn out of the way, take like this, have like a 3 passed pawns together. Not really passed pawns. I guess it's kind of a hanging pawn structure, but with 3 of them, it's not really a hanging pawn structure. And probably black is just going to push through and make a queen with pressure on the queen side as well. That's the king side. Whatever. I guess the kings are just on the weird side of the board, but that's the king side. Pressure on the king side as well. Either way, a6 simply stops any knight jumps from coming in, so that's a reasonable move. My opponent goes bishop e2, which is good. Trying to stop me from like easily moving my rook out of the way, and like keeping this pawn is a little bit of a problem area for me. And I probably should have just given it up, like went rook g8 here. Like this is completely winning. There's nothing to be done. Rook hg1, not rook hg1, rook dg1, probably rook g1, and let's say bishop d7, and black not bishop e7, sorry, not bishop e7, king e7 is a move that makes a lot of sense here. Why is bishop e7 bad? Rook g8, obviously, king c7, rook g7, king here, knight a4, threatening this, and there's nothing I can do. Okay, the more you know. Either way, instead of that, I played a better move than that sequence, and I played the move king to c7, which made sense to me. Simple idea is, okay, well, I'm getting my king off the back rank. I want to do this, rook c8, put the king on g8. I feel like king c7 is just a good move in general. I'm not really showing my cards just yet, and it feels like life is good. King c7 on the board. My opponent goes rook hf1, simply attacking this pawn, and I don't really have to think too long because of course I have to defend the pawn, and I simply go the move bishop to e7, defending the pawn, keeping this pawn defended. This is the next move, then I might play this, then I might play this, then eventually I'm going to be able to push with f5 after I bring my king out of the way. a4. Okay, I don't really see the idea. I don't really know. I don't really know what the idea of a4 is, so I just didn't care, and I kept going with... Sorry, I'm having mic troubles right now. Okay. Hope that didn't hurt anything. Let me just check. Test the test. Okay, good. Everything's good. I'm going to keep that in. Anyway, a4. a4 is the move played, which I just didn't think did anything. I could play bishop d7, but I thought, okay, well, my opponent wants to keep this pawn as a target, so I'm just going to move it out of the way, not a target anymore. Play the move h4, making the pawn not a target, and trying to stop like the development of these pawns, because I didn't want him to play h4 himself at some point and keep the pawn on a light square. So I did this. My opponent here goes bishop to g4, which is a good move, making sure that, okay, now that I move a pawn, you get this square. And I had this very, very clever idea, I thought, which was this move, rook g8 first, hitting the bishop. I'm saying, okay, bishop h3, I'm just going to develop normally, play the move bishop to d7. This move doesn't work because, of course, the bishop is defended. And at the end of the day, I'm just going to be better with my rook on a better square. But the point was that if my opponent goes with the move h3, defending it, now my idea was to play rook to f8. Another rook move with the same rook, but the reason why this is so good is because now my idea is simply to play f5, and there's not much my opponent can do about it. My opponent has to play a move here. My opponent goes with the move bishop back to f3, which is a good move. Good move, all things considered. Simply moving the bishop out of the way and making so that f5 doesn't really work now, because I thought... I actually don't know what I thought here. Maybe I thought take, here. Maybe this is what I thought, but this is wrong. What is the real... Oh, I take back with the rook. Psst, okay, nope, never gonna find that. Anyway, bishop d7. I just played a random move, making sure that the pawn is under a little bit of fire, so that if the knight ever tries to come in with some weird tactic, the pawn will fall. My opponent goes a5, which is a decent move. I guess the idea is to stop any of this, but I can still play b5. Like, you haven't stopped me. Like, en passant is nothing. It's just nothing. Now, actually, probably that would have been a better choice than what I did, but I simply went with rook ac8. My opponent goes bishop g4 back, and I go with the move I go with the move king to b8. Which is inaccurate because it allows something that I've been trying to prevent for a very, very long time. And in this position, king b8 should be a blunder, because it basically blunders a draw. Well, it'll be an almost equal position where black is pushing. The way that I should have done this is that I should have just played... I'm a little bit irritated by why I did that. I was thinking about this move. I could have played f5. I don't really know why I didn't play f5. Like, this is fine. Like, I can go for king d8, and if you trade off the dark squared bishop, just black is always better, because black has everything going for him. And, I mean, three connected passers, basically. Like, almost passers, but close enough, right? And the light squared bishop. I should have just gone for that line, but for some reason I was a little bit scared, so I was like, well, I'm just going to put my king on b8. And I calculated a quick line that after the move knight to d5, I would take on d5, lose my light squared bishop, and then I thought, okay, well, I have a big center. My mic is being very strange. I don't know if I can... Okay, it's back to normal. It's very, very strange. Sorry if this is annoying, but I really don't want to not be heard. Either way. Knight d5, I thought of a very, very simple line. The reason why I didn't play bishop to d8 is kind of stupid. It's bordering on miscalculation. It's because of knight b6, I thought, and after this, I calculated this move, and I was like, why am I getting forked here? But I simply have the move bishop to b5, which would mean that I win a piece, which is just very, very silly of me. I should be able to find that. Either way, I take on d5. My opponent takes on d7. And my idea here was very, very simple. Now, I would simply go rook c7, my opponent goes bishop f5, I would take on e4, bishop takes e4, and I'm arguing that, okay, at the end of the day, black is up a pawn, black has the chances here, black has these three powerful pawns in the center, and white has really no pawn movements because this pawn earlier in the game stopped all that. So I was like, well, I really like my position, and I think I'm going to win the game, which is accurate, but actually here, I missed something insane. I missed this crazy idea, d takes e4. Which is just insane. I didn't see this at all. And after bishop takes c8, I just win. King takes c8. My king is walking up. If any of the rooks try to come here, try to come to this square, the next move is going to be f5. Like there's nothing that my opponent's going to be able to do. This is the next idea. There's nothing for him to do. I have just too many pawns. And if I found this would have been like one of the best games I've ever played. But I didn't. Rook c7, bishop f5, d takes e4, bishop takes e4. And my idea was to go after his pawn that he put on this square earlier in the game, but with the move rook to c4 first, hitting the bishop. And after the bishop moved, I would go rook to a4. One simple thing is that I can't really go rook c5 because I thought rook d5, and I'm like, I don't know about this one. I can't really trade the rooks either because after rook fc8, not take sake, sorry, but let's say my opponent just does nothing here, like goes rook f5, goes for after this pawn first. Black is just not in time. To be able to get this going, so this would not be correct. Either way, rook c4 is the best move. My opponent goes bishop d5, and this allows me to play rook a4, hitting the pawn and saying, okay, well, now I'm going to win the pawn. I'm going to be up 2 pawns in endgame. I don't care that it's opposite colored bishops. I don't think that you can beat me in this position, but I did something really stupid here. And after the move rook f5, I just had to be patient for one move. One move I had to be patient for, and then it would be game over, and I would probably be winning this game. I just had to play rook to h8, not allow my opponent to get here, and it's game over. It's simply game over because my opponent's rooks can never come in. I'm up 2 pawns, and at the end of the day, I'm going to walk my king up to this square probably, and I don't know. I mean, I'm going to figure something out. I'm up 2 pawns, and I'm winning. But instead, I take the pawn. And now I'm losing the pawn. I'm losing this pawn here, but even worse, after rook to h5 is a fork. It doesn't look like it, but it's a fork. He's attacking this pawn, but what he's really threatening, and what's the big issue here, is that he's threatening this move, rook to h7, which would put like my whole position in problems here, because after rook h7, I can't move the bishop back. I'm hitting my mic all over the place. This is really stupid of me, but yeah, whatever. After rook to h7, I can't bring my bishop back because of this move rook to g8, and I evaluated that position as a draw, which I'm pretty sure is correct. If I can't find a random move. Let's see, this move, and this move. Well, this is actually better for white. My point still stands, and I keep hitting my mic, which is actually very annoying at this point. So I had to be careful here, and I realized that I have to play correctly. I played the move f5 here, which defends the pawn and argues, okay, after you play the move rook to h7, I had a very sneaky idea. Bishop d8 is actually slightly better for white, even though white is down a pawn in this line, because after rook b7, b7, king to c8, and the move rook to h7 back, I guess this is just better. I don't actually really understand this position, but for some reason white is slightly better here. I just thought this was equal, but whatever, because I can't really make progress with these pawns without that extra one, and it's not looking too good for me to make progress. So I found the best move, which is this move rook to e8, simply defending the bishop very, very passively, which of course I didn't want to do, but I thought I had no choice but to play this move. My opponent goes bishop to f7, and I calculated here, I would go rook c8, bishop to e6, and I would play rook c7. And at this position, I stopped calculating. I'm like, he's going to win this pawn. He's going to win this pawn on f5. It's not the end of the world. We don't have to freak out just yet. My opponent picks up the pawn on f5. It's fine. And I'm like, Okay, I think black is still playing for a win. I think black is still playing for a win because black has these powerful pawns, and there might be a world where I'm able to survive, maybe get the rook over here, for example, and have a decent position. I started the advancement of the pawns off with the move d5. Coming up here, trying to play this move e4, and maybe I'm trying to keep going. Maybe I'm gonna like get something going here. I don't really know. I'm just pushing the pawns. I have a minute on the clock, so I'm a little bit nervous because my opponent's 30 seconds up. And I was worried about being flagged. My opponent goes bishop to e6, hitting the pawn. I'm forced to go with the move d4. My opponent goes rook to f1, and actually black is winning. If they find a crazy line, e4 is the move chosen by me because I thought it just made the most sense. I'm going for the win. I have to go up. My main point is that I might want to play this move at some point. If this move, I simply get rook e5 defending the pawn. If my opponent goes rook e1, then, well, of course he would lose the bishop. But I guess that shows that there's not much that that white can do here, which is pretty incredible. My opponent instead goes rook to f7, which I looked at, and I immediately, my brain was going off. My alarm bells, in my head were like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, this has to be winning. There must be a trick here that wins for black, and there is. But with 45 seconds on my clock, I cannot find it in time. I simply cannot find it in time. So I ended up going with the very, very lackluster move, bishop to d6, which basically gives up the winning potential. The move here that wins for right, there's two. That wins for black, there's two. The move rook e5 wins for black, which was the move that I was looking at. But I was unsure of what happens after a rook takes e7. But here, actually, there's no hope. And I just go e3, and my pawn is too fast. I wasn't even able to calculate that. The other move, the much more cool move, is this move d3. And the idea is if my opponent takes here, first of all, d takes c2 is a checkmate, which is not the hardest to find. I'm able to make a queen, and there's like mate and a couple moves. So my opponent would have to take, but after e takes d3, takes, and here, this is where kind of it gets cool. I play the move d2, and there's nothing my opponent can do. There's just nothing my opponent can do. If my opponent goes with this move, this is a checkmate, which is fun. It's not like my rook is pinned or anything. It looks like it's pinned because if my rook moves now, let's say if my rook moves here, this would be a checkmate, right? But it's not pinned or anything, and d2 is actually completely winning. So if I found either of those lines, I would be winning the game, but I don't find it. So after rook f7, I go bishop d6, trade the rooks, lose the pawn, and now the game is over, and I'm down 20 seconds on the clock. And I was immediately thinking, oh no, I've seen this happen a million times before. My opponent is going to flag me. And in this position, I realize that I'm just a little bit sad, and I go rook e5. I'm playing really fast. I go b5. Here I have another chance to make a win. This is my last chance for me to actually be able to like spend time and find it, which is the move d3. This isn't the hardest thing in the world because after takes, I go e3 and there's nothing my opponent can do. Looks like my opponent can go here, actually just e2, and my rook is defended properly. And my opponent, of course, goes here. I would simply play e2 anyway. Opponent have to sack the bishop, and this is a winning endgame for black because, of course, rook and bishop versus rook is a draw, but not when there are pawns on the board. And although my opponent has 2 pawns for the bishop, it is enough for me. Instead, b5, my opponent goes bishop e2, and I start bringing the king, but I blunder a tactic here. And in this position, I realize, okay, well, it's a draw, but my opponent is going to flag me. Rook takes e4, rook takes e4, bishop to f3. I'm down 10 seconds on the clock. I go king c6. I'm down a ton of time on the clock. There's nothing for me to do. Bishop takes e4. By the way, the tactic is that he's sacking the rook, but then he gets this pin on my king with the rook and the king. There's nothing I can do. So king to c6, bishop takes e4, king to c5, g4. I go bishop to d8, stopping this, but everything is, but it's a draw. But of course, I'm lower on time, so I was just very, very sad here because of course I'm going to lose the game and replay on for a bunch of moves. I'm playing really fast. I'm trying to save my pieces. I'm making threats. My opponent comes down, tries to attack this. I defend. I'm down 3 seconds, which is too much time at this point. He goes for some play, and I know I'm going to lose. And then my opponent loses on time, and I'm the one that flags him, which is insane. Oh my god. I like audibly gasped at this point because I really thought that I was going to lose this game, which was just so funny. And I don't even after that, I was down on time for the entirety of that section. I was down like 30 seconds the entire time. Here I was down 20 seconds. Here even it's equal on time, and then like here, for example, I'm down some time. Look, I'm down 4 seconds on the clock. Of course that's gonna be losing at this point. But I'm able to make it out, and in the end of the day, I win the game the same way that I thought my opponent was gonna win the game. And that's incredible. Either way, that's all I've got for you today. I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys found this entertaining, instructive, all of the above. If you did, remember to like, subscribe, do all the normal things YouTubers tell you to do. And yeah, that's it. Good evening and good night.